Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today. We are going to talk about Sicilian. We are going to talk about Sicilian deviations, which is known as Gotham Sicilian or Ukrainian Sicilian. So today we are going to talk about this position. So e4, c5, knight c3, e6, because I'm a Kan Sicilian player. I prefer to play e6, and some of you also follow my recommendations. And here in 96. And I was asked on Chessable what black should do in this position if white plays queen e3 or queen d3. So this is what we are going to talk about. GothamChess plays queen d3 mainly in his games. Some players also prefer playing queen e3, and we are going to talk about these variations because, this is a modern tendency nowadays, and you may meet it, especially if you play against someone who wants to trick you with his home preparation. Okay, so we are waiting for more people to join us, and also, okay, can I do the opening again? Yes, sure, I can. So it's e4, c5. Well, instead of typical knight f3, they play knight c3. We still continue with e6 as Sicilian players, as Kan Sicilian players. d4, c takes d4. They have to take with the queen, and then knight c6 gains a temper. But then this queen retreats to e3 or d3. I don't see the point of retreating the queen to d1 because typically black has in mind the idea to castle. That's why they'd better vacate the queen side to let the king castle as soon as possible. So they lose the temper, and what's the compensation? Yeah, this is what I'm going to talk about. Queen a4. Okay. Queen a4. Okay. Well, very nice idea. So queen a4 doesn't deserve attention at all. Let me just show you. Queen a4 is a terrible move. So they play queen a4. How we may continue? Well, there are a lot of good moves, and maybe this or this is the best, but you can still continue with a6. This time you cannot play b5 because of bishop b5 or knight b5. But let's say they play this, you play queen c7. Now, if they play knight b5, which is very common, you can just play queen b8 and the knight is hanging, so the knight has to retreat. And then you play b5, so the queen has only one square, it's this, but after knight a5, the queen is completely trapped. This is what often happens in my students' games. So that's why queen a4 doesn't really deserve any attention. Well, a6. Well, a6 is okay. So by the way, what does the engine say? Well, a6 is good. Also, after knight f3, it's possible to play not queen c7, but rook b8 with the same idea to unpin. So any move, including bishop f4, will be faced with b5, and after queen b3, it's basically the same. This time, actually, they have our rook and knight for the queen, but it's still winning, completely winning for black. So queen a4 is definitely a mistake. So here, for example, according to the statistics that I see on Lichess among title players, queen d3, there are 16 games with queen d3 and 16 games with queen a3. And the statistics shows that white wins in 44% of the games, 31 ends in a draw, and 25 or 31% ends in a win for black, and 25% are drawing. Well, let's change the statistics. Okay, so before we start with this theoretical webinar, let's first talk about the homework. There was a homework, so Actually, John, who is absent today, unfortunately, sent send me an email with the answer. So let's talk about his answer. So he here suggests, well, in the first position, black to move b4 with the idea of knight c2 trapping the rook. But if b4 is played, I think white can just try to save this. And knight c2 is not, well, knight c2 is a possibility here. Knight c2, rook c2 check, then they take the pawn on e2. But it may be not a winning position. So you take here, for example, take, and they play this. So it's not winning. That's why b4 is not the most accurate thing. Maybe, guys, you have any other suggestions here? So, well, first of all, we continue with the homework from our previous webinars when we were talking about rook and knight endgames, and especially we were talking about tactics in such endgames. So there was also alternative that John also messaged me later. Yes, so this is what exactly, yeah, so it's knight c2. Well, knight c2 is stronger because if then knight takes, rook takes, then the king goes back, let's say. You can take here, they take, you take, and this is how black is a pawn up. But are you sure it's winning? It should be winning, but you may face with some serious complications. Well, 4 versus 3 should be winning. There is also one more pawn on the other side for both. So it's, yeah, it should be winning, but it's definitely not the best. Moreover, once knight c2 is played, there is rook c1, and you have to consider this move too. So knight c1, what happens? According to John answer, there was this, and this. So black still gains a pawn and wants to, well, where does he go? To g1 again to protect this pawn. So, well, if we exchange the rooks, it's completely winning because knight in games are quite similar to rook in games. So this is nice. This is correct. However, let's go back. I have a better solution. The black player Alexander Yevdokimov found a better way to play. He played rook to d3 with the idea of delivering a check on d2, which not only cuts the king off but takes this pawn anyway. So how to defend? How to defend the second rank? Because moving the king doesn't work. Moving the knight doesn't work. Then the rook is trapped. So, oh, well, actually, knight f1 may work. So knight f1, then, well, okay. Then you can tell me how to deal with it. So, what do you think? Knight c2, as I suggested, but then they play rook d1. Oh, okay. So, perfect. So, John is on YouTube. Fine. Well, rook b2, well, after rook d3. This is exactly what was played in the game, and we are going to talk about it a little bit later. So here, rook f3. Well, rook f3 looks, when rook f3. So first, if that happens, then I think it still favors you. So what you can do, you can take on e1, they take on d3, you take here with the check. This is a weakness, so they have to bring the king probably. Then you can improve the knight. So maybe let's say they play this move, then you play knight c2, it's still a tempo gaining move, and the position is still winning. So b3 is a weakness. So it doesn't work. But maybe instead of doing knight c2, we have rook f3. Let's decide, well, then this, and then how? Well, maybe you just take here. What do you think? Well, actually, it is a blunder, right? So yeah, it is a blunder. So, well, okay, rook f3 doesn't look so promising. Okay, so rook b2 was played in the game. If knight f1, you should continue with knight c2, rook d1, and then take on a1 and take on a2 with a check, gaining a pawn and trying to exchange the rooks after that. So here, after the move that was played in the game, which was rook b2, black has a very nice idea. The rook on a1 is no longer protected. So simply this. The rook goes there, knight d4, the b5 is protected, a2 is still the object of the attack. That's why here the game continued with rook d1. However, one pawn is already won, and black continues. They do not exchange. They play knight c5 to make a fork, and because there is a threat of a fork, king e2 is a must. Then there is an attack here, and even after this move, it's still completely winning. Knight e4, knight c3, and you gain this pawn. So that's why they can't actually save anything, and you can already take on a2. But maybe you don't want to lose on b5, so let's save it and then take on e2. So rook d5, but very nice knight e6. So everything is based on these knights fork. So if they take on b5, after the exchange, you can fork on d4. So they went there, rook goes here, well, knight d4 was still a threat, and then after a few moves, a fork was applied, and if this, then this. So it's simply just rook takes a2, gaining the second pawn. Knight goes to b4, but just take here. So this and this are hanging both, but knight c4 and the pawn is poisoned because of the knight being under attack. So knight c3 doesn't make sense. The rook is hanging, the rook moves, and this is a winning position with two extra pawns. Black even decided to let white take and continued with this because there is always the knight under attack. Well, then you'll see what happens. This. And with two extra pawns, this becomes a very simple endgame. That's it. This is where they resigned. Okay, so that was one of the examples, and the key idea was to play rook d3 with the idea of rook d2. Okay, now the second one, which John solved properly. What we should do in this position is just vacate this square for the knight. Let's gain something and vacate this square. So we can play this. Well, the key idea is that once pawn takes, it's this, check, the king goes away, and then they also lose one of these two pawns. However, here many of you may struggle with this. What about this move? Well, if we move the rook, they just end with extra knight. If we take, then we are a knight down. And here you have to calculate a little bit deeper to realize that after this and e6, the knight is really bad placed and cannot stop the pawn. So this, and it's too late to stop. And there is no way to control the queen in square d8. So this is how black managed to win. Okay, fine. So we are done with it, and let's start with Ukrainian variation or Gotham Sicilian, or you can call it how you want, actually. Okay, so what do we have? Well, let's again. Well, first of all, let me explain the concept. Well, if many of you think that this is a novelty, no, it's not, because in 1998, my coach told me to play such a strategy. My old coach, he unfortunately died last year. So, and as white, he told me to play this variation. And actually, for many, many years, I thought that this is a mistake and it would be better for me to play direct and open Sicilian lines, which are well known, but which may provide me with a tactical play where I can demonstrate my tactical and calculation skills. So, but because he told me to play this, I was doing this. Not every time successfully. And we also, in that year, 1998, we also did some computer analysis in this position. Well, the engine shows that the position is mainly equal. So, and nowadays, maybe just 1 year ago, Ukrainian grandmasters started playing this. Well, not only Ukrainian, but they started playing this variation. So e6, d4, c takes d4. So white can play such a strategy against any Sicilian line. However, it's really difficult to play for a win, especially if black knows how exactly to play. And we are going to learn how exactly to play if you're a Kan Sicilian player and you play e6. Well, what else? You can learn GothamChess, which is the most popular chess blogger nowadays in the world, plays this on. Well, I don't know if he plays it in his over-the-board games, but he definitely plays it online a lot. So, and here he retreats with the queen to d3. And let me explain what his strategy there is. So he's basically playing the same thing. He tries to play this and castle queenside. Well, and then he tries to play through the center. It's not about the kingside attack. He castles there. What black is trying to do? Queen a5, a6, b5, and some kingside attack. When the position opens in the center, white is usually stronger. Very often, bishop f4 move provokes d65, which allows white to occupy the d5 square with the knight, which is a kind of an achievement. And because of that, white gets more winning opportunities. Well, the most simple way in such positions and against his strategy with castle queenside is to get the pawn to d5, which can be done with the support of the f6 pawn. It leads to an isolated pawn, but very often, if not always, this isolated pawn is compensated with your piece's activity. So if you want to defeat Gotham chess, just play knight f6 d5. At least you will be able to get equal position, then the rest depends on you. But because Gotham is a good chess player, so he is an international master, he wins games with white pieces here more often, especially because he knows this line better than black. But if black knows how exactly to fight against such a strategy, then white has no advantage at all. And even this strategy provides blacks with better chances to play for a win. So I'm going to show you. I'm not going to show everything, all lines, all deviations, but I'm going to provide you with the guidance of what you should do. So typically, the idea of queen d3 move is to avoid main lines that black already knows. So this is something new where the black player, if he doesn't know how exactly to play, may struggle with planning, may get into some traps. What white wants to do here? White wants to play either this or this move to stop queen c7 with some pressure on g7. They definitely want to castle queenside, but this is not obligatory, not in all variations. And they want to attack d6 and ideally provoke us to play these moves, which we sometimes are fine, sometimes not. So let's start. Well, first of all, I would like to talk about queen e3 move. Well, queen e3, there are several continuations. What do you think? Which one would you prefer? If you are a Kan Sicilian player, you probably will answer properly. So, for example, I'm sure that Brian may answer properly, or Peter. So what do you think, guys? Okay, so yes, Brian, very good. So yes, both moves you suggested are possible, and yeah, so knight f6. So knight f6 is the possibility. Also you can play d6 or a6. So let's start with a6 first. Why not? So this is what Kan Sicilians typically play. Here it's not the best move, but still playable. So for example, knight f3, bishop e7, because if you play knight f6, you will face with this. So bishop d3, and then you just play d5. E takes, and then you are threatening with d4, so it looks nice. You have an isolated pawn, but at the same time, this isolation is compensated with uh, a lot of activity with black pieces. So what else can be played here? Well, here Peter says that a6 create a weakness on b6. But Peter, when you mean a weakness, it means that you should have in mind how exactly your opponent exploits this weakness. Because, well, potentially, yes, but most likely after a6, sooner or later, b5 will be played, and then, well, how does white occupy b6? So maybe they can start with this move, but it seems to be premature at the very beginning to play such a strategy. Also, after this, I'm fine to play b5 and let you play knight b6. I'm happy to exchange my bad bishop on c8, because you know in Kan Sicilian the bishop on c8 is actually bad, and if you can exchange it, or you can well, instead of exchanging it, black spends a lot of tempi to trying to solve this issue and fiancetta the bishop, or trying to play d6 e5, or even just d5 to open the bishop and to let him go to f5 or g4. So that's why if we exchange this bishop at the very beginning, it should be fine. So what else? Bishop, okay, instead of this move, bishop d2, b5, castle, bishop b7 is also playable. But what I don't like here is queen g3. It's still playable after that, but there is a pressure on g7, which means I can hardly develop my bishop from f8. So b5, bishop g5, queen a5. I don't want to exchange pieces. Moreover, I don't want to blunder. So if this, it's e5. If this, they take and then they capture on g7. So queen a5, creating a pin. Knight f3, h6. If he goes there, it's pinned. Oh, it's trapped. So if he goes there, we can play b4. If he goes here, then just let's develop pieces. And look at this queen. So actually it's well placed, but at least black can draw the game here with this and repeat the position. If black doesn't want to repeat, black may just play b4 and keep developing pieces. It also looks fine. But after b4 and knight b1, don't play this. It's unlikely to lead to a good position. You just let the knight go back. Okay, fine. So a6 is still playable. d6 is playable too. But what I don't like about d6 is that this move is a bit passive, and when you play d6, it eliminates the opportunity of playing d5. So f4, a6. Well, how do they play? Well, typically, people who plays this prefer to do a fiancetta to activate his bishop, but b3 this time isn't the best option. So let's say they play knight f3, and then you can still do these moves. So it looks fine. And if they play b3, white can play g4. Yes, white can play g4, but it's too early to play such a move. And also, when you play g4, you should be ready for queen h4 move. Because after queen h4, well, do you have to exchange the queens? If so, what was the strategy of such a, you know, such a queen maneuver? Actually, they want to keep the queen alive. So playing g4 is a mistake. Okay, so b3, and then we can just play d5, taking advantage of the weakness. So it looks like a mistake. We just play d6 and then we play d5. But now this knight is weakened, and after e takes d4, knight b4 is a double attack. So queen d2, e takes d5. So we can take with the knight, but we can also take with the pawn. So here many of you may say, oh, well, don't we lose a pawn? What if they play a3? Okay, guys, so this is a question for you. If they play a3, what should we do? I actually think that once knight c6 is played, we just plunder the pawn on d5. And maybe there is some compensation, but not sure. So what do you think? Okay, again, thank you, Brian. Yes, we play d4 because if they take here, we do not take the knight, we take the pawn, adding pressure, and they experience issues there. So, for example, bishop b2, we can just play this move. Well, this, we can also play knight f, well, yeah, we can also play this move because if they take, we do this and take here as well as here. If they take with the queen, they lose everything. Well, bishop b2 is the most logical option, but well, still knight f6 looks good. Maybe you take first. No, let's do knight f6. And we're threatening with this and want to capture it here. So it looks really nice. So that's why they shouldn't take. They should move there. But then we simplify the position and get rid of an isolating. Queen d2, take. And look at this position. They definitely take, maybe with the bishop, but it seems equal, right? So bishop e2, and well, black doesn't have any weaknesses in this position. Well, f4 looks suspicious for white. The position is open, both players has two bishops, so rook e8 is coming, knight f6, bishop c5. So there is no possibility to castle kingside. I think it's too risky. Where do they develop this bishop? Probably to e3. However, bishop b2 looks logical. Anyway, it's definitely playable. So there are several ways you can do to equalize the position. Here, after queen e3, you can play a6, d6, or knight f6 that we are going to observe. Well, knight f6 is considered to be the strongest move. Well, e5 is a blunder because knight g4 is a double attack. Well, and you guys probably know that if in Kan Sicilian you can develop your pieces avoiding queen c7 and a6 move, you should avoid them. So what they can typically play here, there are several options. f4 is one of them. And what's your opinion how to deal with this move? Because they played one with the queen, the second time with the queen, and also with the pawn one more time. We did only, well, one pawn move, which is the central pawn move and which opens our bishop. So f4 doesn't open his pieces, but e6 does. So e6 is a more helpful move. d5. Okay, so thank you, Brian. So it seems that you are the most active member of our webinar. Well, you can also play this move. It looks nice too. But d5. It takes d5, and here, just the key moment, we do not take knight b4, which is a double attack. Well, they have to defend on c2. Well, maybe they deliver a check, but this check doesn't make any sense because we just get rid of our bad bishop. So, well, if they take, they lose the queen. So that's why here probably bishop d3. But if that happens, you can just take on d5, simplifying. And then what's the purpose of f4? For example, take. And here, let's take with the queen, activating the queen at the same time. We are also about to play knight takes d3. So this is a very nice position. We don't experience any problems developing our pieces. However, it's not the end. So knight takes on d5 is not the only way to play. You can also just sacrifice this pawn with bishop e7. So if they take, look at your pieces. There is a strong compensation, and well, if you keep analyzing this position with the engine, you will realize it. If they play a3, then finally we have to take. Knight takes c3, queen takes c3, and castle. And it's not clear what the f-pawn does and how do they solve the problem with the open diagonal here. Because if every time this is played, we have this and this. All we need is just to find a square for the bishop. But I think we're going to play this move. So bishop d7, rook c8, and bishop c6 or somewhere else. So f4 doesn't work because of d5. So because d4 is the threat and they have to somehow deal with it. And knight f3 doesn't work, of course. We have more attackers. So what else? Bishop c4 is the second option. Well, the bishop is typically bad when there is a pawn on e6. So bishop e7, again, this faces with this. Well, let's say, how do they play? Well, because we are about to play d5 after that. We played bishop e7. So here, d5 doesn't work because there is a pin. But after bishop e7, we are threatening with d5 and then d4, which means that they have actually to move the queen away. How would you play then to simplify the position? Okay, yes, guys. So here, Brian and John are correct. We take on e4, they take with the knight, and then d5. So they, of course, prefer to save the bishop. Well, you may exchange the queens, but I don't want to speed up their development, so just bishop d7. If they want to take on c6, I'm completely fine with it. I'm gonna have a bishop pair. And black is slightly better again. Right. What else? e5 is definitely a blunder. I don't think we need to discuss it. So here just knight g6 is fine, and this is not an issue. So e5 doesn't deserve attention. What else? Bishop d3 is one of the most common moves in this position. Then, well, just bishop e7. So e5 still is not a possibility. Here, they can do two things. Bring the queen to g3, which is the original idea of white, or just develop pieces with knight f3. So let's say queen g3. If we want to draw the game, we can play this. So queen g4, knight f6. And if they finally take, we have this, and then rook takes g2. So this, rook goes back. And black is completely fine here. I played a similar variation in a different line of Sicilian, where white is developed much better. So here it's fine. Well, or it will be a repetition. But if you don't want this repetition, you can try d5. Well, queen goes there. It's still rook g8. Then you play this move and take on e4. Looks fine. You have this pawn protected. Well, after d5, they can also capture here first. Then you take, and then they capture on g7. Well, then you take on g2. It's also fine. I would prefer more open position because I think that this king is more in danger than our king because of better development of black pieces. Why black is better developed? Well, it's mainly because of the queen's maneuvers. How many moves did they play with the queen in the very beginning of the game? So queen g3 shouldn't be an issue, and the g7 can be sacrificed because mainly g2 is a weakness after a queen takes g7. So knight f3 in such a case seems to be more logical, but here you play this, and if they take, you just play knight e5. So if they play this move, you get a kind of a French defense line. So I don't think that it makes sense to continue with d4. However, even d4 looks playable here, because d4, knight takes, queen takes, queen takes, knight takes. Well, it looks fine. But knight d7, castle, castle, rook e1 to support e5. And, well, looks like French, but I would say a better option with French because you have the central control. Those of you who think that bishop h7, knight g5 is coming are mistaken. First of all, black plays knight c5, threatening with d4, and knight takes d3. So the only thing is to care about the bishop. So they cannot move the bishop because of d4, so they have to play maybe this to secure the d4 square. Then you just take here. And okay, are there any French defense players? Which typical idea you can play for black in this position to try to get chances to play for a win? So knight before, well, knight before the queen moves away maybe to b3, and you do not control the d4 square. So knight before is not a French defense player move. Okay, so well, looks like there are no French defense player among us except me. I was playing French defense for 15 years, so f6, with the idea of pushing the e pawn forward. So undermining e5, if they take, they are likely to lose because of our strong center, so they have to support it. But it still doesn't work because, well, yeah, you see, so they cannot take with the knight. There is a bishop hanging. So bishop takes, we take the bishop. They capture with the rook. Why not with the knight? Okay, the answer is because of that. So they have to capture with the rook, then bishop f6, and there is also an issue. We are also about to play e5, e4 later in the game. So that's quite playable. So which tells us that actually bishop d3 here is still a mistake. What they have to do otherwise? Well, bishop d2, playable. So how we continue? Just bishop e7. What now? Well, this is still a mistake, but playable. So if you want to know everything about such type of the positions, you should definitely consider this move. But of course, the main one is just queen g3. Let's talk about e5 first. e5, you go there, queen goes here, so you can capture here. And in this position, if your opponent is well prepared, he plays h4, because this is what the engine recommends in this position. So the idea of such a move is to strengthen your position, the white's position on the king side. Well, and you shouldn't protect the pawn, just instead play in the center with d5. Queen g7, knight goes back. Well, here this doesn't make any sense. So if they play h5, you just trap the queen, right? So this, all the squares are covered. So they have to escape. e5. Knight f3. If they play this move, I still think it's bishop f8. And after the queen goes back, it's f6. The queen finally retreats, but look at the position. So we have a strong center. We are also about to play this move. looks fine. Of course, here we castle to the queen side. If instead it's not h5 but knight f3, which seems to be logical, d4 and knight goes to the center and bishop f5. So this is a very sharp play with good chances for black to play for a win. So, but if white knows, he may play h4. The vast majority would still do this. Then knight g6, queen h6, you play d5, and after knight f3, you even get the strong center. And here, this strong center guarantees a better position with better chances to play for a win. So, no. Queen g3 instead. Well, then you just play d5 right away. So if they take this, and you take on a4. Because it's a discovered attack, so they have to play this. Then knight d2, and then you play e5. So, well, they can deliver a check, but just bishop f8 after that, and looks like this king is more in a danger than your king. Okay, fine. So looks really good. d5, maybe e5 can be played, but then you play d4. So they take, you take, you're threatening with a mate, so they have to take here. But bishop takes f6, defends the g7 pawn, and there are no problems at all. Well, rook d1, you first take on c3. If they take here in castle, just this, develop your bishop and castle, so it's equal. Maybe even you have better chances because of the weakness on c2. Okay, fine. So that was bishop d2, and we came finally to this last move. Okay, how you should play here. There are two moves you can play, bishop e7 and bishop b4. So let's talk about bishop b4, because e5 now knight d5 can be played. And if they play a3, knight goes to g4. So if he goes to d3, then he has problems with this. If he goes to g5, you can exchange. And this is actually the homework for you, how to continue here for black. If they instead play queen f4, which is the strongest move, then you just take and place queen f6. So they have to exchange the queens, after which you are completely fine. This they are strategically losing because of these weaknesses. So they can't fully take advantage of the bishop pair here because the bishop is restricted, and because of the double pawns here. So bishop b4 looks good. This is what you should play. e5 there. So e5 where? You mean e5 for white? H, oh, e5 here, a3. At the ends of the black slide, so e5. You mean they may play this move? Well, I think it's a mistake. So, for example, knight e4, you have to defend here. Bishop b2 looks logical. b6, because they always have this idea. So bishop d3, they go to c5. E5 for black gives up the d5 square, right? But this time, so we shouldn't weaken d5 if we expect the enemy knight to go there. How can you imagine a situation where this knight goes to d5? Well, potentially the knight can go to d5, but it takes so many tempi. And very often when the knight goes away from the center, we play d5 ourselves. Even if not, we can always exchange on d5, either the bishop or the knight. So here it's completely fine. Okay, guys. So let's say we are done with queen e3. So queen e3 is common, but queen d3 is also playable. So it's 50-50. 50 title players play queen e3, 50 plays queen d3. Actually, you might be interested in other statistics. What do chess players play? Okay, so here there are a lot of games with queen d1, which makes almost no sense. Queen e3 is more playable. So there are 155,000 games here with Queen e3 on chess in their database among all players. So there is Queen e4 and Queen d3 only plays 9% of all chess players. The statistics is approximately equal. So if you want to see it, it's here. Okay, fine. So let's go back to our task. So we are talking about queen d3. I am not actually following any chess statistics here because I look at what strong players, like I choose Masters database on chess instead. But actually I use ChessBase usually. So what should we do in this situation? Guys, I want you to suggest plans here, the ways of how Black develops their pieces. Okay, thank you for your suggestion. Well, it's actually Black to move. After you mean e7, Joanna? Okay, guys, and while you're thinking, let me share something with you. So for those of you who wants to learn how to play Kan Sicilian, my the most full course is the Victorious Kan Sicilian. So here, so you can go to course info. Here I cover, well, if not everything, almost everything. And I'm going to update it with the line that we are learning on this webinar. I here on the webinar, I'll show you only the part of this analysis, but the full analysis will be added to Chessable later, and it will be well annotated. So if you want this course, so this is the link. This is the most full course about Kan Sicilian. So the link is here. Okay, also for those of you who wants to donate, there is a button here. So there is a link that you can use if you want to support my webinars. You can also suggest your own topics for the webinars. So it's easy to donate. You click donate button and then you enter the amount you want to donate. And then you click PayPal, and after you enter your PayPal account, you can automatically transfer the amount you mentioned to my PayPal account. This will support my work. I really appreciate it. Okay. So the link is copied. Let's now continue with the analysis of the variation. So queen d3, and I see your suggestion here. John suggests knight f6, bishop s7, and d5. So yes, you're actually right. But There is also a possibility of playing a6, actually. However, well, again, if you can avoid playing a6, you should, because pieces development is a better priority rather than anything else. However, very often in my games, I delay castling. So I develop my pieces, but delay castling to save a temper and take advantage of it uh, and castle later. So maybe I play some pawns to get a more favorable pawn structure and only then castle. So if you think that not castling at the moment won't lead to any disadvantages, then you can delay it too. But don't delay your minor pieces development. Okay, so that was a suggestion. Also, well, let me check the chat here. Okay, so Joanna suggests bishop e7. Fine. So a6 is playable. Then, for example, if they play bishop f4, we have b5. Well, let's say knight f3, bishop b7, a3, they stops this move, but we can still play it. Knight f6, and well, then after this move, how would you play? What do you think in mind, guys? Bishop takes f3. Okay, so bishop takes f3. Okay, so the key idea is that knight c2 works. Okay, so pawn takes, and then probably you mean knight f d5. Well, interesting. They probably will react with this move. So maybe it's too early to give up such a bishop. Any other suggestions about how to deal with it? Well, this seems to be logical, but look at this move. If they take, you'll be attacking c2. Yes, thank you, John. This is exactly what I mean. So you'll be threatening c2, which is a bit risky for white. Okay, fine. So bishop f4 doesn't look good. But this is what GothamChess plays. So play a6 and punish him after bishop f4 with b5. Even if he castles, you can keep doing the same things. Okay. So, well, if he does conduct any simuls, you can try to play this strategy against him. He definitely will play this line. Okay, so instead of that, queen g3 can be played. Well, after which I ask you to keep doing b5. Let's say bishop g5, queen e5. Knight goes there, and well, here h6. Well, we analyzed something similar in queen e3 line. So then this move, and again, it looks okay. So the position is a bit tactical, so it should be fine. So this is a weakness. You then develop your pieces. You can actually exchange even the queens with this move. I also like bishop b7, knight c1, knight h5. So the knight is protected. That's why, well, if they move the queen, we can still just repeat the position. I also wonder if this works, because after queen h5, I have knight d3. Ah, no, it doesn't work. They have intermediate move. After which I experience problems with this bishop. However, it's still playable. Knight e3, they take with the pawn, and then I save my bishop. But I'm a bit passive. Okay, fine. So let's go back. Well, yes, you can do this, but instead you can just exchange the queens, because you are taking b2, the queen exchanges forced, and this position looks really nice, right? So if they play f4, you go there. Let's actually discuss it. f4. If you go there, then it's bishop g1, and you have to play this move to escape. So yeah, this is fine. Another option is just to play knight c6, and if he does this, if he does e5, you go to d5. Looks like here again, black doesn't experience any problems with development. Okay, so queen g3. Well, a6, queen g3 was covered, but the main move is still knight f6. So if you don't want to learn a lot, you can just stick to this knight c6, knight f6, regardless of where the queen goes. Let's say they play bishop f4 in this position. And now there are a lot of calculation, a lot of variations. So there are a lot of variations, but I want you this time to play a6. There is also a possibility of bishop b4, and I probably will share it inside my course, but the best move is definitely a6. How does it work? So let's say knight f3, well, typically to what Gotham Chess plays, then you play this, and here, well, if they castle, then bishop b7, and I think we saw that position. So your task is to play these moves, develop your pieces, and your attack is likely to be stronger, especially if you play against Gotham Chess, who mainly wants to play through the center. So what if he does e5? This is the key moment, which tells you that with Kan Sicilian principles, playing against this strategy is definitely okay. Okay, guys, so I see your questions. John and Brian, I see your questions. So I'm going to answer them little after, I mean, a little bit after we go through the main line. So what do you think we should do? Well, definitely this is a mistake. Knight g4, h3, knight h5, they just take on h5. So it also doesn't look good, because then they can continue with knight e4 and take advantage of these weaknesses. So what do you think black should do? Okay, so one suggestion is, okay, well, one of the suggestions is b4. That's right, b4 is playable here. It's not the best, but it's playable. E takes f6, b takes c3. So now, well, of course, if this, then bishop b4. So f takes g7 is a must. Bishop takes g7. White wins a pawn, but queen f6. Bishop d2 to defend here and to save the bishop. You are down a pawn, but you have a compensation. And this is the position for homework number 2. How to continue for black here. So it's still playable. You have a compensation, but how exactly to get this compensation? I mean, how to take advantage of your piece's activity? This is the homework for you. I'm going to send it as a separate email. So b4 is playable, I agree. John suggested knight b4, after which the queen goes, let's say, to d2, and then knight fd5. Well, it's still playable, right? Then a3. Now, a3 seems like a blunder, isn't it? Ah, no, it's not, because of queen e4, and you have to give up the pawn back. So rook goes to b8. Well, it's still playable. I think the position is approximately equal. This is an isolated pawn, but the bishop pair and also an opportunity of playing b4 provides black with some chances to play for a win. So knight b4 is possible, but I like b4 better. However, the best move and the move that you're missing here is queen c7. Look at this move. So he takes and we take here. This is really nice. So this bishop is hanging. What they can do, well, they have to do something with it. So, well, I don't think this is a good move. You can still do the same strategy. So bishop e2, and after the queen is here, then this works. So why does it work? For example, a3, you can start with this, and after they take here, you can take here, and now the knight is not hanging because of enough pressure on c3. Okay, you may ask me, what happens if instead of a bishop move to e2, they play bishop g3 move? Well, still knight b4 is a good idea, but this time knight b4 is played not with knight fd5 idea. It's played with knight h5 idea, and actually doing knight h4 right away is even better, because if he does this move, you simply take on e5. So he has to play this move, defending the pawn. Well, then you can play bishop b7, and every time you think that the knight is under attack, you can take here. Maybe you think that he can do this move to stop, to play g4 and to trap the knight. No, h6. And if they play g4, what would you suggest in this position? Well, knight e4, queen e4, g5. Looks like you give up too many pawns for the piece. G5 right away, yes. So it makes your position slightly better. This is one of the possibilities, but the other one is this. Now what? You are threatening with this, so they probably defend it. But then you can play bishop c5. Well, and then go to f4. So they have to play this move to stop you from going knight e4. But this move is even a blunder, more a blunder than anything else, because this is a fork. So queen e2, then knight f4. So you are completely winning here. So just remember to play h6. Okay, fine. So bishop e2, knight b4, queen d2, and knight fd5, which provides you with a better position. So most likely they take, and then probably, well, if they retreat, you win the game with bishop b4, because after this you just take with the knight. And the rook c1 doesn't make sense. So because here you take the rook, and here you give up the bishop. So that's why here actually castle or any other defensive move like a3 or c3 is a must. But then you take on f4 and look at this position. It's much better. So you can play d5 right away. You can just play bishop e7, bishop b7 first, and then undermine with f6, for example, which I think is the best. And with these pieces, your opponent doesn't have any initiative. Also, remember, you are threatening to take on c2. But I want you to be accurate and not forget about your piece's development. So, looks really nice. Okay, now let me answer the question of John, which is, what if knight d5 in this position? Okay, so looks interesting, but seems to be a blunder. Then I just capture the pawn. Because, well, you may say there is a check, and if I play bishop e7, you play this, but I simply block with the queen. There was a Brian's question here about bishop d4. Brian, can you please specify in which position bishop d4? So when the bishop was only 3, but where was it? You retreated the bishop to b8. Ah, to c? No. No, I still do not understand where. With the knight on g4. Ah, bishop to g1. I retreated with the bishop to g1. Yes, I remember this line. Just a sec. Let me find it. Not this. Oh, where is it? So this, no. It's under queen d3 line, so somewhere here. No, somewhere after this. Bishop f4, this. Not here. So, okay, no. It's queen d3, then knight f6, or maybe queen g3. Oh, this is the line, right? So, yeah, this move and then bishop d4. Well, I still think that this should be played. Yeah, I agree. H3, knight h6. Well, it doesn't look so good. That's why, yes, instead of knight g4, it's definitely a good idea to play knight c6. Okay, so now we came up to the second part of our webinar. So I'm going to suggest you to play this variation with black. So you may choose either queen e3 or queen d3. So you are playing with black pieces against one of these two lines. Go to chess.com. And who wants to play? So go to the play section. Yeah, not standard, but this, then 15 plus 10, then this, and okay, so Peter, which you want to play, with queen e3 or with queen d3? With queen e3, okay. So go to the live section of Elite Chess and I'll send you a challenge. Okay, so for those of you who wants to play the game, this is the link to play. It's for bishop e3, or it's for queen e3 position. Okay, so the challenge is sent. I'm going to improvise a little. So don't forget to make a move within 30 seconds. Okay, b6. Oh, interesting. So probably b6 is played with the idea of bishop c5. So if you remember, guys, I told to play knight f6. Well, b6 seems interesting, but okay, queen g3. Now, if you play such a move, you're gonna experience with the problem of with the g7 pawn. What I don't like about my position is that this is a weakness, and very often I have to play this unpleasant bishop d3. So again, you have to play the move within 30 seconds. If anyone else wants to play, just message me. So bishop b7 looks logical. Okay, bishop f4. So I'm trying to control the d6 square as well as to stop the bishop development because g7 is a weakness now. d6, logical. Okay, castle queenside, but then there is a strong pressure on d6. Well, it looks like e5 is a must. Okay, fine. So if I play this move, then it's bishop e7, but bishop e7 I can take, and then I gain the g7 pawn. So, well, yeah, I should play this move. So I can take, then what? Pawn takes. So should I take right away? Well, this is a blunder because of knight e4. Bishop c4 right away. Okay, let me take first. Yeah, guys, just message me if you want to play, if you want to try this line, either with queen e3 or with queen d3. So you took with the queen, but then I play knight d5, and you have to retreat or deliver a check. Retreat, fine. So what then? So f4 looks interesting because I want to open the position. Bishop c4 is playable, as well as knight e2 with knight c3 idea, which is probably the most solid way. Okay, so let's play something aggressive. So not sure what I want with this move, if I want to take or not. So for example, if I take here, the knight takes, after which I can continue with a check. Yeah, the check is a bit dangerous. Yeah, let me take. Because the check on b5 is really dangerous, and black would better avoid it. Maybe it's even the best way just to give up this pawn and deliver a check and castle as quick as possible. Yes, you're right. So it's the best way. Okay, so thank you guys for coming. See you next Sunday. 95. Okay, got you. What about this check? So you cannot block on c6 because I have a double attack with queen to c3. Well, maybe first I take and then have a double attack, but it's still a double attack. King has to move. But you see here, black already experiences some serious issues. The F file is open. So here I have to choose among these two moves. So let's try knight f5. This is a tempo gaining move. So rook f1 and I'm strategically winning. Yeah, this is a very nice game to analyze, and it seems that all White's ideas no, became true, and so Black experienced serious issues. So I think White is winning, and the engine would consider the position to be around plus 2 and 5, 2.5, or maybe 3 even, plus 3. Okay, this move. Well, I'm trying to do a checkmate. Well, I'm trying to attack the king. Of course, it's not a checkmate. I'm just focused on the attack of the king. So here at least I could try maybe take, and knight goes somewhere, maybe here to b4 to pressure the pawn on d6. But there is no rush, and instead I may try to do something else. So what can I do in this position? It's sooner or later it will be time to play this move, e5. Well, not sure if now e5. Well, knight takes, pawn takes, queen takes, bishop g7. And then it's a deadly attack. Okay, let's play it. I think I'm not missing anything in this position. So maybe e5 is not the best, but I still like it because it makes the enemy king more exposed. Well, I didn't consider this option because I thought that I take and I can take here then. So, but maybe I should, well, I should take, then rook takes. Then I can play e6 at least. Yeah, well, if bishop takes, I can still play e6, but I think I would play e takes d6. And if rook takes, I would push the pawn forward, threatening with this. So now pushing the pawn forward allows him, my opponent, to capture. I take, then maybe f5. It's still winning, but let's just take. Knight e7 becomes a threat. Now queen e5 is interesting. Well, let's start with knight e7. Because there is also knight f5, serious threat. Okay, what's the best way to play here? Queen here, then f6. Knight e5, then rook e7. Oh, knight d4 probably is the best. Yeah, knight d4 is the best. I'm threatening with knight f5 as well as something else. So what else I can do? Take here, queen takes. 7. Okay, let's do knight d4. I can play knight f5 later. With this move, I'm threatening to take here as well as to play knight f5. I also open this, so which makes my queen e5 several times stronger. Yes, you have to play like that, but then I take here. And if queen takes e7, it's knight f5, obviously. And I'm gonna play knight f5 anyway, because you have to move the queen now. So black lost the exchange, and black is about to lose a piece. Yeah, thank you. So we can analyze this game. So how to do this like that, PGN, copy, and let me share the webinars again. Okay, so here we are. So b6 is definitely too slow. Queen g3, and now you cannot develop the bishop. So with knight f6, at least you would be pressuring the pawn. Okay, bishop b7, bishop f4. So what I'm going to do here is something like that. That's why black plays d6, which seems to be logical. Well, now
Sorry,
this is,
if you go back a few moves, yeah, with knight to f6, can't you just play e5?
well, in this position, yes, I think it's possible. So you can play this move, but then I am attacking it with this. Well, it's not a disaster because this is still playable. But I think that just instead of b6, you'd better start with this. And now e5 is a blunder. And you'd better follow what we discussed today at the webinar. So here, if we go back, the line is this. Then if I decide to play queen g3, just d5 and you simplify it. Because if e5, the knight goes, well, to h5 or to d7 or even to e4. Well, here, probably this is better. It's still a weakness. And if f4 is played, then with f6, you undermine and bring the knight back. So black may allow themselves to play kind of weak moves like g6 and f6 because they are ahead in development, which is very uncommon for Kan Sicilian variations, but is typical for this line because of this, and this, so many queen moves. Oh, okay, so I think we can go back to the analysis. d6 castle, and this is a hanging pawn. If you want to save it, this is the only option. I don't think there was any counterplay after the sacrifice of the pawn. So I play this, and I think that f6 is the best. I have to move my bishop, and this diagonal becomes weak, but it's still, well, rook c8. So if I play this, it's knight d4. Well, I would probably play this move and would try to open the position. So I still think it's fine for me, because I can hardly imagine how you develop your pieces. Because if you do this move, I can just play here. So, well, it's tough to play this position. Knight f6, I take. So I expected the pawn to capture it, to not move the queen. And here I was debating with this or this move. Well, to occupy this or just to pin the knight and then play knight d5. But queen f6, knight d5, queen has to go back to cover the c7 square. Well, the alternative was doing this, king b, a1 and rook c8. So it's a weird way, but you defended the g7. So then bishop e7, if I take, you take with the king, and it's still a problem. And my plan here should be something like that. Okay, so queen d8, f4. Well, it's hard to suggest, but it seems you have to take. Now you get this square for your pieces, and they played an extra tempo with the queen. So g6 is a mistake. F takes e5, and you cannot take here with the knight. Well, if you can take with the pawn. There is no discovered attack at the moment, but this confrontation looks like a serious problem. So I can, for example, continue with this move, threatening the e5 pawn. And, well, bishop g7, let's say, but then, for example, this, which is a double attack. So queen c7 is a must. Not sure how exactly to play them. Because if queen c3, which I originally thought, then this. Okay, so d takes e5 seems to be better. Well, maybe I can do something else instead of bishop b5. Well, just follow this, or maybe I initiate the h pawn attack. Okay, well, d takes d5 was logical. Bishop h6. Well, if you take with the knight, then I was about to play this very nice move. You have to take, because this is a fork, you have to take. Then bishop b5, after which you have to give up the queen, and you actually give up this queen for free. So because I can do this and then play discovered attack, or I can just capture it for free with this double attack. Threatening to take here, so I'm a piece up. So that's why bishop h6 is correct. King b1 and then castling, but it seems you're losing your 2 pawns down. So knight takes e5, this check, and you cannot block on c6, because if you do this, if you do it with the knight, I take, and then I play this move, which is a double attack. If you do it with the bishop right away, then I still capture, knight captures, double attack. The only way is to block with the knight, but then knight c7, and I gain the material anyway. So that's why it was clever to not block, but to move the king away. Knight f3, well, it's hard to suggest a good move. This, and then I play e5. So the logic here was that I can play e6. If d takes e5, I probably take, and then it looks like there is a problem here. So bishop g7, just queen f4, no, queen f4. Bishop, okay, so maybe queen e4 with these ideas.
Is there
So
anything
it's
with rook takes pawn? Because you have so much
oh
material.
yeah, so yeah, exactly. This is what I had in mind. I remember now. So check, and blocking is a blunder, and not blocking is leads to immediate checkmate. So bishop f6, take, and well, this doesn't work. So here also is a blunder. At least I have this. Right. So yes, this is what I was about to do. Right, I remember now. A6. Then bishop takes e6, bishop takes bishop, and I just gain the other pawn, and then it's absolutely losing position. So here, the simplest way was just to play knight f5, king goes somewhere, and I just take on h6, gaining a piece. But I played a more complicated way. Well, I'm threatening here as well as here, but if you play this move, covering f5, it's still not enough. Moreover, for this move, I prepared queen e5 with queen h8 on the very next move. So that's why after knight d4, I think it's already over. So what did happen in the game? I think that with b6 and the way you were playing, you just proved that I can play queen g3 successfully, pressure g7. So it seems like uh, it seems that this bishop development didn't affect the whole position. Instead, you'd better focus on knight f6 and d5. Well, so instead of b6, knight f6 and d5. At least that would avoid any serious problems. So, well, if you forget everything about that, just try to open the position. Well, as a disadvantages side, you gonna play with an isolated pawn. But the benefits are that you avoid such issues that I demonstrated in this game. Okay, fine, guys. Thank you for coming today. That's the end of the webinar. Again, those of you who wants to support me and my webinars, you can use this link to donate. So I'm going to copy and paste this link to the chat. So it's easy. You just click the button, enter the amount you want to donate, and then click this button, enter your PayPal account, and the money directly go to my PayPal account. Fine. So if you have any suggestions of which topic of the webinar choose next, please let me know. And also, if you're interested in the most complete course devoted to Kan Sicilian, you can use the one that I have on Chessable. And it makes sense to wait for a sale here. Now it's about $100, but I think sometimes they lower the price offering a sale, and it can be around 60 or 70. Okay, Peter, I see your suggestion regarding the topic of the webinar, so I'll think about it. But it looks like people more prefer some strategic webinars or some tactical rather than openings. Because, well, not everyone plays Sicilian, especially not everyone plays Kan Sicilian, but everyone requires to improve his ability to think strategically and also to improve his tactical skills. Okay, there is a line in the Ruy Lopez that is similar to King's Indian. No, I don't know such a line. Well, there is. Okay, I know what you are talking about. So let me create it. Oops. So let me share the screen once again. I think you are talking about e4, e5, knight c3, or knight f3, knight c6, bishop d5, a6, bishop a4, and g6. Okay, so this is called Morphin defense, fiancetta defense. Okay, yes, it makes sense to analyze it. Okay, thank you guys, and see you next Sunday, same time.